And a lot of European filmmakers took courage, I suppose, and ideas from this renewal of the American cinema. Then there was a sort of second generation for us. This is the European point of view, which was what we can call the Sundance generation. The influence of the place and the selection, especially devoted to the idea of independent cinema. And we were, and we are still, very interested and very passionate by the fresh ideas coming, maybe, from US. Less and less, in my personal opinion. On the other side, we have a European cinema which is more and more involved in the discussion what is an independent cinema. What is independent? It's without studios, but there was a generation in which the studios encouraged production groups, especially to find the new talents and to find the new possible issues of the independent cinema in order to pick it up in the studios. And what is an independent cinema in Europe? Is a fragile cinema because it's not strong enough, the production group? These were my questions in a way. You are totally free to be on the same opinion, to agree with it or to change totally. I just want to mention that Stephen Gaydos is not only a very good film critic, he's here also like a producer because he's the co-producer of a Monty Hellman film, and we tried, thanks to him, even to have Monty together with us. Unfortunately, he couldn't attend on time because he's a little bit far from the Laguna, and today is a very special event in Venice, so it's very difficult to join us in the Laguna. But you can discuss with him not only with like a film critic and in a way a film historian, but also like a producer. And with Paul Duran, I just can add that yes, of course, he's a film director, but he was forced to discover, like student, the way to produce his whole movies. First his shorts, then a movie. So he's totally involved in the idea of an independent production, for sure. This was everything from my side. Now it's up to you.
I think your history was very accurate. To be a little more detail, the period that Giorgio spoke about of this independent flourishing and exciting time of the 70s was very small window because the studios were falling apart. The big studio system of Hollywood of the 1930s through 1960s. By the late 50s, they were in chaos and falling apart financially and didn't know what to do to keep the audience. And a movie called Easy Rider happened in 68, 69, and everybody said, oh, we can make these small movies and make big money. So they turned the system over to all these young maverick filmmakers. One very important, very interesting point about the generation of Coppola and Lucas and Monty Hellman and Bob Rafelson and Dennis Hopper, many others, Richard Rush, a lot of good, interesting filmmakers. Their primary influence to re-energize Hollywood and re-energize cinema was European cinema. They all wanted to make movies the way the Europeans were making them because they were inspired by Truffaut and by Godard and by Fellini and Bergman and Alain Resnais. So the excitement that fueled and sent this incredible period happening in Hollywood was really came out of Americans seeing European cinema. The interesting thing about Godard and Truffaut and Romer and Rivette was that they were all critics who fell in love with American cinema. And it's kind of like the Beatles. When the Beatles took American pop music was completely dead. Elvis had gone into the army, and it was a bad time. Little Richard went into the ministry, and Jerry Lee Lewis was arrested or got into big trouble for marrying his cousin, and American rock and roll was dead. And it was Europeans who reinvented American music. It was Europeans who took Hollywood pictures and reinvented them with movies like Breathless, which was 50 years ago this year. So almost the minute that this happened, the times changed very quickly in Hollywood. This was only maybe 5 to 7 years that this little window opened up for this freedom. The studios started to figure out how to engineer the economics, the corporate business of Hollywood, and big corporations came in, and this gigantic kind of monolithic control reasserted itself with Spielberg and Lucas and the blockbusters, the movies like Jaws. And interestingly enough, the first person that became part of this was Coppola with The Godfather, really one of the first giant blockbusters. So almost as soon as this period of independence began, it closed down again, and the studios took over, and it wasn't until 1990, 89 with Sundance, as you said, Sundance generation, American independent cinema again kind of exploded and became very influential. And in my view, almost immediately within 7 or 8 years, it became very predictable, and it became a formula of its own. And almost all of these filmmakers who said we are very independent, like Bryan Singer, he went and made comic book movies, and a lot of them really became part of the Hollywood studio system. A few mavericks, but they didn't really. Jarmusch, after a couple of movies, I don't think his influence became that strong. David Lynch, I think his influence started to decline a little bit. The Coens and Tarantino seem to be still very strong influence, but Tarantino makes extremely commercial, popular sensibility kind of comic book movies, you know. So